Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Core, and in today's marketing talk, I'm going to be talking to the founder of Story On Media and Marketing based out of Colorado. My guest today, Seth Silvers, has had the opportunity to build story-focused marketing and content campaigns for small businesses and Fortune 500 companies. Thanks for hopping on this call, Seth.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about this.
Awesome. Well, let's just kick this off right away. And, right now, a lot of people are being affected, by this global pandemic, which is very unfortunate. We were talking before hitting record on this, and, a lot of really good marketers have been furloughed, not because they lack the skills and all that sort of stuff. So I'm curious from your perspective, both personally and professionally, how has it affected you much in your business? And if so, how are you adapting?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, I mean, it's been a wild few months for everybody. And there's some industries that are doing really well, and there's some that are doing really poorly. And it just seems like it's just nothing's the same for anybody that it was 6 months ago. For us, late I guess early March, like we right away lost several clients, several of our probably more sizable ones. Um, One of them was, we were doing marketing for an event this summer. Obviously, that didn't work out. The other one, like, every month we were doing video shoots with people. And when humans can't get together, that makes that challenging and stuff. So right away, there was definitely an income hit. And it was kind of like, you know what? We have a couple other things that are going okay. But then we also like have seen overall, we've seen a ton of growth. And I think part of that has been because the timing we've been working on over the last couple months, really actually probably the last like year and a half, more of an online program designed for businesses that can't hire out an agency, and really teaching small businesses or entrepreneurs or marketers within businesses, how do you tell your stories well? How do you create story driven marketing campaigns? Pretty much how do you build a content strategy that works? And so we've been building out our online program to satisfy that need and teach people that. And we were actually planning on launching it right around when COVID hit. And so we pretty quickly had people that like jumped into that program because they were realizing like, man, now is the time to start doing online content. And there's been so much heartache and so much challenge from this pandemic that I would certainly not want to like overshadow any of the negative. But as a marketer for the rest of my career, I'll be looking back at this season right now as the, I won't say best, but the most prime example of why a business needs an online audience and why they need online revenue streams. So for any business out there that's been like waiting to get their online marketing together or waiting to start creating content, I mean, even you were talking about before you started recording this show, how like you've been wanting to podcast, but now you're like, okay, now is the time. So as a result, I think being in the online marketing space and in the content space, a lot of businesses right now are like, okay, we got to get it together. And so we've gotten more people into our online program. And then we also had a handful of like pretty large clients that came and they were like, man, we need something like we need somebody to start creating our content fast and we need you to like handle it all. So we've been, I mean, I've been very thankful. Like our team has grown. We've been like hiring every month since March. And I think part of the reason is because for the last 5 years, I've kind of been beating the same drum. Like I've been in it and I've been so like people around me, like they know what we do. And so right now it's been like some of those people have just came to the top and it's been the right time.
Wow, that's really encouraging to hear. I mean, it's especially in the middle of, we're still going through this pandemic. There's still no specific end in mind yet, as far as
Mhm.
when that'll be. So that's really, I'm glad you're able to share that. I'm curious from a business perspective, what do you feel like was that, like some of the, like if you were to break it down, like what are some of those pain points that you feel like, or those levers that you had to, that finally were pushed in order for people to take action, whether it's through the online resources that you're providing or even your agency services?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, I'll just say, and this is kind of going back to the last question a little bit, I just think it's hugely important to like just keep doing what you're doing. Because Like, I'll be honest, there were times in late February, early March where I was like, maybe this isn't like, maybe we just need to take a break. Like, maybe I need to go in house as a marketer somewhere and we just need to like hit pause on the business until this all settles. And so going from that place to then that afternoon getting a call and signing our largest client that we've ever signed. Um,
Wow.
I could have never ever predicted that, and that's not just to like pat ourselves on the back. It's to show that you never know what's around the corner ever. Um, and if you know you're going to be doing marketing for a long time, then just stick with it and do everything you can to stick through and survive times like this, because the value of just being around for a long time is super, super huge. So I think that's one thing that helped us. I think some of the pain points that are coming out in people is realizing, like, for some of your Main Street America businesses, they don't have like their interaction is with people that walk through their door every day. So all of a sudden, when like their doors are shut and businesses around them are, selling online or selling on Facebook or selling on Craigslist or whatever, or selling to their email list, they're like, well, shoot, we don't have an email list. So I think one of the big pain points that this whole situation has brought to the surface is businesses realizing I don't have a list. Like, I don't have a community that I can go to on my terms. Because all of this has been about, it's really, in a way, it's not that different from a Google algorithm change or a change in the Facebook algorithm, where all of a sudden you have this attention, you have this stream of traffic, this stream of people that, the somebody changes a rule somewhere or something out of your control happens, and all of a sudden you can't reach those people. And so, I mean, it's happened historically where there's huge algorithm changes and where businesses that are doing tons of revenue and getting tons of traffic on Google, all of a sudden they're not, because Google changed their mind about who should be at the top. And in one way, this is similar. It's way worse because it's had real life impact on people's health. But it's the same in a sense of something out of your control kept you from your audience. And that's what happened to a lot of businesses. And they realized, well, man, we don't have an online audience. We don't have an engaged list. We don't have something consistent that we can touch base with. So I think that's the primary pain point that this has brought out in businesses, is realizing, like, I need a way to communicate with my audience on my terms, so that whether Google changes their algorithm, whether another pandemic happens, like, I can go to my phone and I can text or I can email people that trust me, and we can work things out together and figure out how to survive this. So I think that's the main pain point, is just it's out of your control, and all of a sudden you have your access to your audience has been cut off.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think sometimes, like, one of the things I've noticed is, when you look at email marketing, and this is just my perception based off of different conversations, as well as seeing how different marketers think and focus on, you hear less about building your list, like less and less. I'm sure when early 2000s, that was a big thing, but it's less being talked about less and less, but it's only becoming more and more valuable, especially when, new platforms like TikTok or all these other ones start coming up. And then all of a sudden what was working, like you said, those shifts within the algorithm change because there's more media buyers, more people paying ads to specifically market and target a specific audience. So I think that's really good advice. So if we were to take a step back, obviously before Story on Media, which you started about 5 years ago,
Mhm.
could you quickly give us like a brief recap of what it was like, outside of being done with college, and then kind of like your career track in a nutshell from there until getting to Story On, because you had been marketing specialist, marketing director, media,
Mhm.
I believe I saw some sales stuff in there. And so I'm just curious, how did you
Yeah.
get to the point for, after college to, yeah, starting Story On?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it started for me because right out of college, actually, and I actually kind of have to rewind, because in high school, I started in a nonprofit organization, and that really it was really successful. We hit a need in our community that a lot of people had, and so this organization kind of took off, that I started when I was just 16. And so from an early age, I saw pretty quickly that, like, you can start things and make them work. Like, you don't necessarily always have to go through other people's channels. And so I knew it was kind of already in me, like, oh, you can just create the solution to the problems you see. And so that was some experience that I had. And so after college, I was actually I had these family friends that were philanthropists, and they were wanting to start a nonprofit organization. So they actually hired me to start to kind of like help lead this organization for them. And then we ended up merging with another organization of my friends because I realized, like, you know what? I know someone else who's doing this really similarly. Like this, they're working towards the same mission in the nonprofit space. So we had a conversation and initially decided, we're accomplishing the same thing. Let's bring our teams together. Let's bring our boards together. Let's bring our financial resources together. And like, let's accomplish more together rather than us both going the same direction. And so we did that. And I became the marketing director for this organization. And so I did that for a couple of years out of college. And during that time, I was just an avid student of marketing and of storytelling. And I was just learning everything I could. In college, I studied communications and I studied business. But towards the end of college, I was watching the Super Bowl and had this experience where I just felt like I was just really frustrated because I was excited for the ads. And I felt like they were all so shallow. They were all so weak. They weren't connecting with me on an emotional basis. So I kind of wondered when I was watching the Super Bowl, I asked myself, like, what would happen if these brands started telling stories of like how they were impacting people's lives, whether it was their employees or communities or through their products, whatever it might be. And so for a couple of years, I kind of just spent all my spare time studying, what would happen if brands started to tell stories. And so I started to find a lot of research that was showing that consumers want to know stories. They want to believe in the brand that they support. They want there to be a cause in the brand they support. They're willing to switch brands and pay more money for brands that they believe in. And so when I started to see that research, I had kind of had some business models that I had been like thinking through in my head as I was the marketing director for this nonprofit organization. And once I saw that research, it was very much like, you know what, there's so much I don't know about this, but I know that if I wait any longer, I'm going to regret it. And so I'm going to start now and start trying to figure this out. And honestly, the last 5 years has been tons of ups and tons of downs of just figuring out how to service small businesses in marketing with stories. I know that that's the goal of what we do, but figuring out the best way for small businesses for us to service them, figuring out the best business model and the most profitable way. I've done tons of unprofitable things in the last 5 years trying to figure it out, and I've learned a ton. And so that's really kind of been the journey. I was marketing director for a couple of years, and there's been kind of some side projects over the last few years. Like I took a contract with an agency out of Dallas and was doing some media buying and media sales, which was really interesting to kind of get a lens into the more traditional TV world and stuff. So there's been a variety of experiences. All of them have been around how do we market with stories, though. That's been the consistent thread.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting that it started, as early as 16, because like I was sharing with you before, like back then I was doing more music, and so it's just interesting seeing that that spark and that interest in marketing and growing something, and progressively going into still telling stories has evolved. And so I'm curious now, with starting your own company. You had mentioned you've had a lot of ups and downs. I'm curious from a wisdom standpoint, for anybody who's looking to either start or is starting their own thing, their own agency, working with businesses. What are some of those like tips or advice you would give to those people? Like, I guess some of those roads that you went down that you're like, yeah, I wish somebody told me, hey, don't go down that road.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, and these are just some like fresh lessons that are kind of coming right now because we're growing. Like we're running into some growing pains. And I think a lot of people think like once you get new clients and once you start growing, that everything is going to work out. And I think that growth very much exposes you. Um, and so like if you have issues, you growing is going to make those issues bigger. Like there's going to be more on the line for those issues. If you're running really healthy and you're running really smooth, then that's going to be, that's going to happen even more so with growth. So right now, one thing that I'm realizing that I wish I would have done more of is just the processes. Like I was just telling my wife when we were in the car driving while I'm sitting there on my laptop working and getting writing down like processes because we have a new team member coming starting tomorrow. And I realized there's a ton in my head. Like I could tell you like everything that we've done for all of our clients and when things are due. Like I could tell you all of this stuff. And over the last year and a half, I've been trying to get my head and my workflow into processes. Because if I don't do that, then the only way I can grow is by hiring more people that work exactly like me, which is not possible, and stuff. So I think that the separation between are people hiring Seth Silvers or are they hiring Story On? I'd say for the first 3.5 years, it was mostly they're hiring Seth Silvers. And so everything is super customized. Everything is like, okay, how can I as an individual help you as a company? As opposed to having a process and having a blueprint and saying, hey, when you hire Story On, here's what you're going to get. Here's the process of how we deliver that to you. And that's been a huge game changer over the last year and a half is just building out those processes. And now that we're growing, there's still some areas where that's like missing, but there's also a lot of areas where that our work into processes has been really, really helpful, and stuff. So I think early on you need to decide: do you want to be like a really successful freelancer, or do you want to build a business? If you want to be a successful freelancer, processes are still going to be helpful, but you just have to realize this is different. Like that pretty much means you're going to be doing really customized, eventually high dollar per hour work. If you're wanting to grow a business, it's got to get out of Jonathan's head. Like you have to actually have blueprints and processes and results that you can repeatably create for businesses. So I think that's been a big one is just getting out of my own head and putting the work that we do into like systematic processes so that we actually can grow.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that because I'm actually little by little chipping away at little processes that I could, take care, eventually either have some sort of VA take care of, or maybe,
Mhm.
a team member take on, once you start
Totally.
growing. And I like the paradigm between like a freelancer, which isn't a bad thing, or a
Yeah.
business. Like it's ultimately up to you how you want to lead and
Yeah,
live
and
that. But
either one is great, but I think that there's a lot of creatives and a lot of marketers that are operating like freelancers that are wanting to build businesses, and there's a lot of businesses that are really stuck. Like they can't grow past a few people, or that maybe they can't get past 100K in revenue in a year, and it's because they're operating like a freelancer. And so both are great options. It just depends on what you want. And so I think finding clarity on what you want. For me, like I've always known, like I want to build a business. Like I want to have a small but powerful team, and a handful of years from now, like I don't see myself having 300 employees. I see myself having like 10 or 15 employees, and they love their job and they can't imagine working anywhere else. And our clients are super, super happy. So it really just depends on what you want.
so, kind of like unwrapping that a little bit, why did you decide to finally start your own company? Having had collaborated and worked for different companies, contract work, stuff like that. What was the, ticking point or tipping point for you to finally start your own company?
Yeah. So the tipping point was when I started to see that there was this gap, and that gap was illuminated by research. So the research that I was finding was showing, like I mentioned before, that people were buying based off of stories. But as I looked at the market, brands were not marketing based off of stories. So, if 96% of people would rather pick one brand over another based on a story, which there's data to support that, and only 10% of businesses are marketing any kind of cause or story based campaign, then that means that there's a huge gap in the market. So I saw that gap and I kind of started pillars out, kind of started sharing my vision and what my plan was. Our original business model was totally different than it is now. Not just because I didn't know what I was doing. But I shared what I wanted to do with some people, and people were like, man, that's awesome. And then I went to this pitch night where in Denver, like one of my friends was like, hey, you guys should, me and my former business partner who started the company with me. And then after about 2 years, I bought him out because it wasn't the right fit. But somebody kind of said, like, hey, you guys are thinking about starting this business. Why don't you come to this pitch night where people are like pitching their dreams? They're like pitching things that they just big dreams they have. And it was kind of this interesting format of presentation. And so we went there and we pitched, and people were just like amazed. They were so fired up. And everybody in the room was like, you guys have to do this. You have to figure it out. So it was kind of a combination of like beginning to let some of my ideas out and letting some other people into those ideas. And then seeing that people were actually like, man, you should do this. Like, you're going to be good at this, but also like there's a need for this. And so I think that was really the tipping point. And, you know, I'm like a man of faith. And so I put prayer into it, and um, did not get a super clear answer. Honestly, felt like it was one of the situations where you have a couple good options in front of you. And I think sometimes the Lord trusts us with our own decisions. And so, but when I looked in the mirror and saw it, it was like, you know what? Now, starting now is going to be better than starting in a year. Like the only difference is in a year, more people are going to be doing this, and in 3 years, more people are going to be doing it. So like, I need to start this now.
Yeah, the first mover's advantage, like
Yeah.
notion. Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
good.
and
And
there's a lot more people talking about storytelling and in context of marketing now than there were when I started. There really wasn't that many people talking about this then, and now it's a lot more common, which is great. Like that means there's a market for it. So
who are some of the, whether they are marketers or just like people who happen to tell stories really well, who are some of those people you read, learn, or research, look up on? I know Seth Godin is a big, person on
mhm.
storytelling. I'm curious, do you have anybody that you reference or get inspiration?
Yeah. So I mean, Seth Godin's an obvious one. If you like marketing and haven't read any of his stuff, then you should get a career, think about changing careers or something. But um, and he's important because I think that he is the best voice on authentic marketing and what marketing should be. And even some of his early books, like in the early '90s, like um, before the internet was really a thing, he's still talking like his flagship book, Permission Marketing, which is like all about really authentic marketing. Like that was published in 1997, really a year before internet became mainstream. So he's really a source that I always go to for inspiration, because he's all about authentic marketing and not manipulating people. The Heath brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, they have a book called Made to Stick that I think is brilliant as far as actually understanding how do you get one piece of content to stick and another, to not, to just fall away and not be remembered and stuff. So, I mean, there are a few that I am consistently going to. Also, there's a lady named Nancy Duarte. I don't know how to say her last name, but she has a TED talk that she gave maybe 10 years ago on how to create like the best presentations, and she analyzes Steve Jobs' 2007 iPhone speech. She analyzes MLK's "I Have a Dream" speech, and one other in there, and she breaks down how they interwove story into it, and she breaks down the story structure of it. And that one TED talk, and some of her other resources as well, but really that one TED talk has influenced looking at every single piece of content and asking yourself, what's the story in here? Even if it's not like a story, like, so and so went this and did this, then even if it's not like a traditional story, every piece of content should have some kind of story arc to it. And so that was really influential for me. Right after I started my business, the book Story Brand came out, and I was familiar with Donald Miller's book for a long time. Or Donald Miller, I was familiar with him far before he wrote that book. And so, I mean, they've done, although the work him and I do is very different, um, he's been an amazing resource for the business community in a sense of just getting people to start thinking about what's your brand story and stuff. So he's somebody that, even though we're filling different pieces of the market, his work has still been really, really valuable.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about Donald Miller. I'm still yet to read his book, but I've heard a lot more people reference his framework, his model, I'm curious. Do you mind sharing just more of a high level view of what Storion's framework or like approaches to telling stories? Just a high level view of how you guys do it.
Yeah, totally. So, kind of over the last 4 or 5 years, we've developed what I call the Success with Stories blueprint. And this is initially a blueprint that I've seen work with businesses. Some people have implemented all of it, some people have implemented pieces of it, but there's some key principles that I think should be a part of every business's online marketing strategy. One of those, key principles is your brand story. Another one is showing behind the scenes content, which I think right now looks like live video, but somehow showing like behind the polished vision of the brand, like showing your personality. Another one of those principles for us is educating and inspiring your audience weekly or really consistently. And so, that looks like podcasts or YouTube videos or whatnot. Like there's tons of information in business owners' heads that they wish that their audience knew. And there's some principles get more into the weeds of advertising and retargeting and different, and having good offers and different things like that. And I don't want to get into the details of all of that blueprint, but initially what we believe in is quality and consistency. I think that every business should be telling stories and marketing with stories on a consistent basis at the level of quality that they can. Doesn't mean you need to go out and spend $40,000 on a red camera and $100,000 on a studio. Like if you have your phone, then start. Like start podcasting now if you want to podcast, start making YouTube videos now if you want to do that. Like there's more tools than ever for people just to start. And so really our framework, and this is kind of how we separate and differentiate a little bit from StoryBrand. Our framework doesn't just focus on telling your story as a brand well, but how can you integrate your customer stories? How can you integrate your values into the consistent week by week marketing content that you're doing? Because I just like 2 months ago, I had a client sign up, start working with me, and I asked them how they found out about me. And they said that they saw a video that I put out there maybe like a year and a half ago. It was like one of my first videos once we really started implementing this blueprint. I don't know, probably got like 100 views, like nothing fancy, didn't go viral. That person wasn't commenting on my post saying, "Hey, I'm interested in working with you in the future." They didn't comment and say, "Oh my gosh, this is great." I didn't even know they were watching. But that consistency, that person was there and they were looking at us from a distance. And they saw that we were consistent in creating content about our mission and about how we wanted to help people. And a year and a half later, they were ready to go. And so the blueprint that we help businesses implement is really all around creating consistent quality content that's not exhausting for the business owner. Like there's a lot of business owners out there that do not have that much time. They don't have 20 hours a week to be marketing. And so we have an online program that teaches, okay, if you're going to be doing this yourself, if it's going to be you and your phone, or maybe you and like, maybe you're going to spend a couple $100s on some gear, then what do you do? And we teach them the exact blueprint. Here's how to decide what content you should be producing. Here's how to know how long you should be producing. Here's how often you should be producing. Here's how to repurpose that content so that you create one piece of content and turn that into 10. So we teach people how to do that. And then from there, there's clients that say, "That's awesome. We just want you to do it for us." And that's where our agency side comes in, is when there's clients where we're producing their weekly podcast. One we're producing a daily podcast for, or we're producing weekly YouTube series, or, going in and filming video customer testimonials and capturing those stories and turning those into advertising campaigns. So that's kind of like our model is we have this online program that's a really involved coaching program that we're actually teaching businesses how to do it on their own. And then there's also the agency side where we're taking a little more responsibility in the content creation and implementation of that blueprint.
That's That's real. I really like that business model a lot. That's actually, as you're explaining it, I'm like, I'm being sold. I'm like, wow, like that's that, like
Good.
your funnel is, it's well thought through. So I'm curious. It's kind of a two-part question. You mentioned obviously content creation is a big part of what you do. You currently have your own podcast. You mentioned you have your
Mhm.
own YouTube channel. You have social media accounts. You have a blog. I'm curious from your perspective, which method or outlet has been most rewarding to you? I know that sometimes depending, like I'm sure, like I prefer LinkedIn. That's like my main means to do marketing and put content out there. But I'm curious,
Mhm.
what method of all the ones that you do is the most rewarding to you? And kind of, it's a second part of the question to what you just mentioned, how you got a customer from, one of the videos you made, is which outlet or means has produced the most results for your business?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, and I totally agree with. Yeah, I love where you're going with this because I think that one of the most important things in content is enjoying it, and so um, Gary V and his stuff is awesome. I pay attention to everything he's doing, and I usually tell people I 100% agree with 80% of what he says. Um, and so, like a lot of his models have been really, really great. And um, one thing that he like nails is initially every piece of content, it's either going to be written form, it's going to be audio, or it's going to be video. Like in today's culture, every piece of marketing content is going to be one of those things. Um, and so with our clients, we encourage them start with whichever format energizes you the most. So like if you love the idea of podcasting, or maybe you're a little camera shy, then like podcast, like get going on podcasting. If you like love videos and you love figuring out how to make them engaging and all that stuff, then start there. If you don't know where to start and you just need to start with like a weekly like blog or email and optimizing more of the written form side, then that's great. And so that's kind of where we advise our clients. For me, podcasting really is super energizing for me. Um, I could interview people all day on a podcast and feel awesome about it. Video, I really have to force myself into and stuff. And so for me, I love podcasting, or I guess that's been the most energizing for me. Um, I would also say, as far as like what's been the most, profitable or productive for our business, I would also say it's probably podcasting, and I think there's a few reasons for that. And I'll just say, like, none of our like I've never had a viral video. I had one, I don't know, I had one like blog post, 4 years ago that got like 2,000, like 2,000 reads or something, and I'm not sure why. But other than that, like I've never really had anything go viral or be huge. Like we don't have huge numbers, but our numbers are focused. Like the people that are following our content are the right people. And so, with that, the podcast has been the most profitable and brought us the most clients. It took probably like 9 months. And really, like, my focus on the podcast was not to make money right away. It was very much like, this is going to be something that if this brings people to us in the long run, then that's great. Um, and part of the reason that I think that was the most profitable is because, Jonathan, I'm sure that probably at least 10 people that could make a video for you right now. And you probably know very few people that could make a podcast for you, and do it well. And so I think just as far as supply and demand goes, there's just way less, like not as many people know people that can do podcasting really well. So for us to start, and we've really just realized that in the last like 6 months, to where like people have been like, great, can you produce my podcast? Awesome. Can you produce mine? Like, awesome. Like, we need a strategy for our podcast. And so I think it's just been a timing thing for us, in a sense of kind of pivoting a little bit, not a ton, but realizing for right now, we're going to focus a lot more on podcasting because there's much more of a demand and there's less supply out there. There's not as many people that are producing podcasts and stuff. So that's been kind of a unique thing for us. And I'm sure that my energy towards podcasting has probably came through in it. And so the people that have listened to our podcasts have wanted to jump on board and wanted us to do it for them.
Yeah, that's really good insight. I think I heard. I don't know if you know all the metrics specifically for podcasting, but I was listening to a marketing podcast the other day, and they were saying there's about, under a million or under 900,000
Yeah.
podcasts total, as opposed to like there's over a billion, I don't know how, several billions of blogs out there.
Yeah.
And so when people decide to start a blog, if you want to do it, just, like keep in mind that you're you're going against billions of,
Right.
other blogs as well.
Yeah.
So
And
I
it's interesting. It's interesting too, if I can add this in, that like when somebody watches a YouTube video, they like that view is going to be tracked after like 10 seconds. And maybe you'll get lucky and they'll watch for 3 minutes, or maybe they'll watch for 10 minutes or something. But the reality is, sorry, we got our Blue Jays chirping at our cat. um, but the reality, like when people listen to a podcast, the majority of podcast listeners are listening to over 70% of the podcast. And so like a lot of people that are going to be listening to this, some will fade away after 5 minutes, but for people to spend 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 20 minutes listening to a conversation, like that builds a level of trust that is really unparalleled. And so like, thinking about doing that to 100 people or 100 listeners, like that's huge. So I think that's why the podcast has also been really profitable, is because the people that listen to your podcast regularly, they feel like they know you. And you don't necessarily get that when people just see a Facebook post.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're mentioning too about, people reaching out like through your podcast. Once I started posting content on LinkedIn and being active with this, I've had a few people say, "Hey, what's your gear set up?" Asking me, and I'm answering all these questions, and then it ultimately leads to like, if I were to pay you, would you be able, would you want to do this? And I'm like, I would, let's hop on a call and see what I can do to help. But it's interesting because the people that take action ultimately and are putting content out there have a better chance of, like you said, building relationship with people whom you may have not even thought you would do business with, but eventually are interested in having the same result that you're producing for yourself.
Totally.
For your business. So now segueing more into the last, few questions within this talk, which has been super insightful. You're a business owner and you're building your own team. And if we're to set the pandemic aside, people being furloughed because the bottom line is, or cash flow is being, hurt and all that sort of stuff. I'm curious, what skills or characteristics do you believe make a marketer essential within a company? What types of people do you look to work with, and keep on for as long as you can, based off of, what type of marketer and even what type of person they are?
Yeah. Yes, I think first off is just going to be like a desire and willingness to learn. And I think that's kind of brought into like just how fast changing and ever changing the marketing world is. I've often said that I'm not emotionally attached to any platform. Like, I don't really care that much about Facebook or YouTube or anything. Like, I think different platforms have different advantages over others. But what I am attached to is storytelling. And I think that like there's principles behind marketing that are not going to go, like, they're not going anywhere. But the ways that those principles are implemented are going to change all the time. And so I think as a marketer, you have to kind of always be looking for those things, or be willing to learn them. I don't think that necessarily means everybody should be spending, half of their days on TikTok or whatever platform is booming right now. But I think that having that mentality of this could look drastically different in a year. And like the way that we serve that, the way that we get this client results 6 months down the road or 12 months down the road could be very different than it is now. And so I think just the willingness to learn and the willingness to adapt, I think is super huge. And I do think that there's got to be a cause or like a purpose behind my workers and behind my team and stuff, like, because if we're looking at our clients content, or we're teaching clients how to look at their own content, um I'm not just concerned with what makes money on the front end. Like, I'm concerned with what's going to build a relationship with your audience, like what's going to get them connected to you over value. And so I think looking at everything that we do and looking at everything that our clients do through like, okay, why does this really matter? I think that question being asked often is really important, because otherwise we'll just get into the rhythm of just creating templated content over and over and over again, and then like losing a view of what we're really doing, which is not what every other marketing company is doing. Like, my goal is not just to make my clients money as fast as possible. Our goal is really to work with people that have a purpose and like that have a vision behind their business, to make an impact long term. And so my team members, like, they got to have that vision long term as well.
That's really good advice. So now, as we segue to the last question before we hit the rapid fire questions, if you had a chance to sit down with 16-year-old Seth, who's about to venture off into this nonprofit and eventually grow and develop within your career, what advice would you tell Seth then, that based off of everything you learned and experienced at this point?
Hmm. I would say, um, to not, it's kind of funny, but to not keep secrets. Um, so I would give myself personal advice to let people into the more like vulnerable challenges that I was working through and that I've worked through personally. Um, because like the personal turmoil or the personal like challenges or setbacks or addictions or whatever you might be going through, that affects your business life hugely. Like, that affects your professional life. And so I'd probably give myself some personal advice and tell myself to not hold it all into myself, and to like really invite some people into some of those like vulnerable parts of my life.
Yeah, that's really good advice personally, but I think even business too, because like you mentioned or alluded to earlier, there's ups and downs, and so I'm sure it's good to have a community, whether it's of business owners or coaches, other means to get around people and just say, hey, things aren't going as great as I thought they would. I would love to just talk it through and see how you're doing, or just being able to share. I think that's
Totally.
highly valuable information and feedback and advice. So now we'll transition into the last, the four rapid fire questions. And the first one is more practical. And the first question is, what is your favorite marketing tool or software that you're currently using for your company?
Um, it's getting windy. Can you hear all that wind?
I can. It's not super bad though.
Okay. I'll give it a little windscreen. Um, I think just from a super practical perspective, I probably use Canva like multiple times a day. Um, it doesn't solve every design need, but I think there's just times where you just need something super quick. And I think Canva has been super great for that. So that's probably the tool that I use the most frequently.
Canva's great. So what is your favorite online marketing course that you've taken up to this point? Yeah.
So I have not taken a ton of courses. I did just recently join a program called the Authority Accelerator, which is by Sunny Lenarduzzi. And she's really prominent in the YouTube space. And she's awesome. But her course like transforms your business like before you even start transforming your YouTube. So yeah, that's been a really, really awesome program to be a part of.
Great. I'll for sure add that in the description and add all that information there. What's your favorite business or marketing book that you've read up to this point?
It's hard to say favorite. I read a lot. But I think most essential is probably Permission Marketing, like I mentioned, one of Seth Godin's first books. Um, I'll also say his most recent book, This Is Marketing, has been real. Like, that's been one that I've probably just like picked up and read a few pages of, probably 15 times in the last year, and stuff. So I think both of those probably.
So I have a prediction on what your answer is going to be to this last question, which is, who's your favorite marketer, either someone you know personally or someone you've admired from afar. My guess is Seth Godin, but I'll let you answer.
Um, I don't know if I can say he's my favorite marketer, because I honestly haven't really seen a ton of what he's marketed. I mean, other than I guess he's marketed his own books and stuff, but um, man, that is a good one. I think that I've had a lot of respect for Blake Mycoskie and how he's built Tom's shoes. He hasn't been as prominent in over the last few years, school and college, and Tom's was really experiencing their growth, seeing how he positioned their story and how he positioned their products, and how he integrated those two things together was really influential for me. So he would definitely be up on that list for me. I mean, they started their company by releasing like a documentary and stuff. So they've done a lot of innovative stuff that's been really great.
Yeah, for sure. Super memorable and recognizable brand for sure. So if people are interested in learning more about you and your business, what platforms or how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So first off, connect with me on pretty much any social platform. You can find me at and just search Seth Silvers. Luckily, there's not too many of me. And then to just find out more about what we're doing, head over to our website, which is successwithstories.com. And yeah, if you guys have any questions about the work that we're doing or would want to follow up, then reach out to us. Would love to talk with you. And yeah, thanks so much for this opportunity, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate your knowledge, your experience, and as well as some of the resources and even some insight into what you're doing within your business. So also thank you as well for being willing to share that today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, if you haven't yet, please like, share, and subscribe. And also in the comment section down below, feel free to comment what your biggest takeaway was from my conversation with Seth today. Take care.